Kang Ji-won came to Incheon Airport with red roses for the woman he thought was his future. Instead, he found the woman who had vanished 7 months ago, carrying a child whose existence he could not yet explain. The sight should have answered every question he had been asking himself for months. Instead, it created a far more dangerous one. Why did she look less shocked to see him than the woman standing beside him? The airport was loud. Kang Ji-won noticed none of it. Not the boarding announcements echoing through the terminal, not the rattling trolley wheels, not the thousands of travelers moving beneath the bright white lights of Incheon International Airport. He moved through the arrivals hall like a man the world made room for. Black suit, black shirt, no tie. 40 red roses wrapped in dark paper hung loosely from one hand. Beside him walked the woman he was supposed to be thinking about. Beautiful, elegant, waiting for him to say something about dinner, about tomorrow, about the future. Ji-won heard none of it. Because 40 feet ahead, a woman in gray had just stepped into his line of sight, and his entire world stopped. She wasn't searching the crowd, wasn't looking for him, wasn't even slowing down. One hand pulled a silver suitcase, the other rested beneath the unmistakable curve of her stomach. 7 months, maybe 8. For a second, Kang Ji-won forgot how to breathe. The roses slipped lower in his grip. His security team kept walking. The woman beside him kept talking. The airport kept moving. But he couldn't. Because the woman walking away from him was Nyla, the woman who had vanished from his life 7 months ago without a single explanation. The woman he had spent every day trying not to think about. The woman he had never been given the chance to grieve properly. The woman beside him
여보세요?
finally
무슨 일이에요?
noticed. Her fingers tightened around his arm, not possessively, fearfully, like someone seeing a ghost. Ji-won. No response. Who is she? The roses hit the floor, red petals scattered across white marble. Still, Nyla didn't look back. That was what destroyed him. Not the pregnancy, not the silence, not the shock. It was the way she kept walking, as if he had already been mourned, already been buried, already been survived. His jaw tightened once. Then, quietly, so quietly that the woman beside him almost missed it, Kang Ji-won whispered 4 words. That child is impossible. The woman on his arm went completely still, and then his phone rang. Once. A number he hadn't seen in 7 months. A number that should have been dead. Nyla. Calling him. From inside the terminal. He should have walked away. That was what his mind told him in the 3 seconds after the roses hit the floor. Walk away. You have a meeting in 2 hours. You have a woman beside you. You have a life that no longer includes her. His legs refused. Nyla was 30 feet away now. 25. Still moving. Still not looking back. The silver suitcase rolled beside her like she had done this 100 times. Arrived somewhere alone. Expected nothing. Needed no one. The gray dress stretched quietly over the life she had been carrying without him. Ji-won's lieutenant appeared at his shoulder. Sir! 1 word. The kind that meant we have a situation. I see it, Ji-won said. She landed 40 minutes ago. Nigerian passport. No listed contact in Seoul. A pause. She didn't tell anyone she was coming. She didn't tell anyone. The words landed differently than they should have. Because Nyla had lived in Seoul for 3 years. She had contacts here, friends, a life she had built quietly alongside his, carefully kept separate from the violence of his world, but present, always present. If she had told no one she was coming, she hadn't come back for a reunion. The woman on his arm, Seo-yun, had gone very still beside him. Not the stillness of someone confused, something tighter, more calculated. Her eyes were fixed on Nyla's back, with an expression Ji-won had never seen on her face before. Not jealousy, recognition. So-yun! She blinked, turned to him, smiled. And the smile was almost perfect. Almost. She's nobody, So-yun said. Probably just someone you... I didn't ask you to explain her. The smile disappeared. Ji-won moved. Not running. Men like him didn't run through airports. But the crowd parted anyway, sensing something in his pace that made ordinary people step aside without knowing why. He reached her at the far edge of the arrivals hall. Nyla. She stopped. Didn't turn immediately. Just stopped. Like she had been expecting this exact moment and was deciding how much of herself to bring to it. When she finally turned, her eyes were steady. Not soft. Not relieved. Steady. You look well, she said. 7 months of silence, and that was what she gave him. You look well. Something moved through his chest that he refused to name. Where have you been? Away. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting in the middle of an airport. Her eyes moved briefly past his shoulder, toward Seo-yun, toward the security team, toward something else entirely. You shouldn't have followed me, Ji-won. You shouldn't have come back without telling me. For the first time, something shifted in her expression. Not guilt. Something closer to grief. I didn't come back for you, she said quietly. Then her phone began ringing in her bag. She looked down at it, and the color drained from her face. She hadn't come back for him, but someone inside that airport knew she was here. 7 months earlier, Nyla had been happy. Not the fragile kind of happy that depended on circumstances staying perfect. The deep kind. The kind that had taken her 2 years to build inside a life she was never supposed to have. She had known what Ji-won was from the beginning. Not a rumor, not a reputation. She had seen it directly. The men who waited outside restaurants. The calls he took in separate rooms. The way entire buildings shifted their energy when he walked in. She had loved him anyway. Not because she was blind to it. Because beneath all of it, she had found something nobody else seemed to see. A man who remembered exactly how she took her coffee. Who learned 3 phrases in Yoruba just to make her laugh. Who looked at her sometimes like she was the only thing in his world that made sense. She had been 3 weeks pregnant when everything collapsed. Not with sickness. Not with fear, with a message. It arrived on a Tuesday morning while Ji-won was in a meeting, delivered through a channel only his inner circle used. Typed in clean, formal Korean with his private seal embedded in the header. Nyla Okafor is to leave Seoul within 48 hours. All ties are to be severed permanently. This is not a request. She had read it 4 times. Then she had done what the message told her not to do. She went looking for confirmation. What she found was worse than the message itself. Bank records showing a transfer to a relocation firm that specialized in making people disappear quietly. Travel documents already prepared in her name. A signed authorization with Ji-won's personal code, the one he used only for decisions he made alone. She had sat with that evidence for 6 hours. She had built explanations, dismantled them, built new ones. By midnight, only one conclusion remained. He knew about the pregnancy, and he had chosen this. She didn't cry. That surprised her later, when she had enough distance to think about it clearly. She had expected tears. Instead, she felt something settle in her chest, cold and permanent, like a door closing from the inside. She booked her own flight, left before dawn, told nobody. Because if the man she loved had decided she was a problem to be relocated, then the last thing she would give him was the satisfaction of a scene. She would leave with her dignity, and she would raise their child alone before she would raise it as an obligation. What she never knew. What she had spent 7 months building her entire reality on top of, was that Ji-won had never sent that message. He had spent those same 7 months tearing his organization apart trying to find her, and someone had let him search. While knowing exactly where she was, she left to protect her dignity. He searched to protect her life. And somewhere between those two truths, someone had built a lie large enough to swallow them both. Ji-won had not slept properly in 7 months. Not since the morning he walked into his penthouse and found it exactly as he had left it. Her coat still on the chair, her book still open on the counter, her coffee cup still in the sink, and Nyla gone. No note, no call, no explanation that made sense of any of it. He had turned his entire organization upside down in the first 2 weeks. Every contact, every border record, every surveillance feed within 3 kilometers of the building. His lieutenant, Park Sung-jin, had worked without rest beside him, running names, pulling threads, coming back empty every time. By the 3rd week, a different kind of evidence had started appearing, quietly, almost gently. First, a withdrawal from a joint account he had set up for her. 50 million won, moved to an untraceable overseas account. Then a conversation, recovered from a deleted messaging app on a phone she had left behind. Words between her and an unknown contact discussing a departure date, discussing payment, discussing silence. Then the final piece, a photograph. Nyla at Gimpo Airport, smiling, standing beside a man Ji-won didn't recognize. Luggage at her feet, nothing about her posture suggesting fear or force. Everything about it suggesting choice. Ji-won had looked at that photograph for a long time. The man he was in public would have moved on immediately, filed it under lessons learned, replaced her within a month. The man he was in private had put his fist through a wall. Then he had done something he told no one about. He had kept looking, not because the evidence was wrong, but because it felt constructed, too neat, too complete. Real betrayals were messy. Real departures left loose ends. This one had none. Every question he asked had an answer waiting for it. That was what troubled him. Betrayals that answered every question before you thought to ask them were not betrayals. They were architecture. Someone had built this, brick by brick, placed the withdrawal, staged the conversation, taken the photograph at exactly the right angle to show her face clearly enough to hurt him. He just couldn't find the architect. Now, standing in the arrivals hall with Nyla's unanswered phone call still burning in his hand, That old certainty returned. She had not left him. She had been removed. He turned slowly and looked back across the terminal toward Seo-yeon. She was watching him from 30 feet away, phone in hand, expression carefully arranged into something that resembled concern. Ji-won had spent 15 years reading people for survival. Seo-yeon was not concerned. She was calculating. And she had been calculating since the moment Nyla walked through those arrivals doors, which meant she had known this moment was coming. The only question was how long she had been preparing for it. He had mistaken architecture for betrayal. Now he was standing inside the building, and the architect was already watching him figure it out. So-yeon had prepared for many things. She had prepared for the possibility that Nyla was still alive, had rehearsed what her face would do, had practiced the exact ratio of confusion to concern that would make her appear innocent without appearing ignorant. What she had not prepared for was the pregnancy. That detail had not been in any of the files. She stood at the far end of the arrivals hall, watching Ji-won's back and doing the only thing available to her. Thinking fast. 7 months ago, when Chairman Wu had first approached her, the assignment had seemed straightforward. Get close to Kang Ji-won. Hold his attention. Keep him focused forward instead of backward. Make sure that by the time the inheritance documents were finalized, he was too invested in a future with her to examine the past too carefully. Nobody had mentioned a child. If they had known about the pregnancy and hidden it from her, that was a problem. If they hadn't known at all, that was a bigger one. She watched Ji-won reach Nyla, watched the way he moved through the crowd toward her. Not like a man approaching an ex-lover, like a man approaching something unfinished, something that had never actually ended. Seo-yeon recognized that walk. She had been briefed on his psychology extensively. Kang Ji-won did not chase things. He was the kind of man who decided and moved forward. The fact that he was crossing that terminal right now told her everything the files had failed to. He had never stopped. Her phone vibrated. A message from a number she had memorized and never saved. Is she showing? Seo-yeon typed back with 2 words. 7 months. 3 seconds of silence. Then, this changes the timeline. Do not let him speak to her alone. She slipped the phone into her bag and arranged her expression back into something manageable. Then she walked. Not quickly enough to seem desperate, not slowly enough to seem unbothered. She reached them just as the conversation was turning. Nyla's eyes moved to her immediately, not with the hot jealousy Seo-yeon had expected, with something far more unsettling, pity, as if Nyla already understood exactly what Seo-yeon was. Not a rival, not a threat, a instrument. I think, Nyla said quietly, her eyes still on Seo-yeon, you should ask her how she knew my name before you introduced me. Ji-won went still. He turned, and Seo-yeon realized 2 things simultaneously. First, she had made an error somewhere, a small one, but Nyla had caught it. Second, the man looking at her right now was not the man she had spent 7 months managing. This was the other one, the one the files had warned her about. She had been placed beside him to manage his attention. She had never considered that the woman he loved might be the one to expose her. There was a rule inside the Kang family structure that very few people knew existed. Ji-won had not created it. his adoptive father had, 20 years ago, written into the foundation of every legal, financial, and criminal alliance the family controlled, buried inside documents that required 3 separate lawyers to fully understand. The rule was simple. The first blood heir of the Kang line held an automatic claim to the inherited voting trust. Not the businesses alone, not the properties, the trust, the invisible architecture beneath everything, the mechanism through which 12 allied families had agreed, 2 decades ago, to move as one unit. Whoever controlled the trust controlled the alliances. Whoever controlled the alliances controlled half of what moved through South Korea quietly. Ji-won had never thought about the rule seriously, because Ji-won had never planned to have children. Not inside this life, not with what he knew about what this life did to the people closest to him. But someone else had thought about it, extensively. Park Sung-jin found him in the airport corridor 20 minutes after the confrontation with So-yun. His expression carried the specific weight of information that couldn't wait. "I need 2 minutes," Sung-jin said. They stepped into a private lounge. Ji-won's security sealed the entrance. "The inheritance review is in 6 days," Sung-jin said. "Chairman Wu filed for accelerated succession 3 weeks ago. If you sign the transfer documents before the deadline, the voting trust moves to the Allied Council permanently." "I know this already." "You don't know this part." Sung-jin set a document on the table. "If a verified blood heir exists before the signing, the transfer cannot be completed without the heir's representative present. The child would hold blocking rights until adulthood." Ji-won looked at the document. Then he understood. The child was not just his. The child was a legal obstacle to everything Chairman Wu had spent years building toward. A breathing, unborn interruption to a transfer of power that had been engineered across 2 decades, which meant Nyla had not been removed because someone wanted her gone. She had been removed because someone understood, before Ji-won ever did, what her child would mean. His phone rang. An unknown number, different from Nyla's. He answered. A voice he didn't recognize. Calm, clinical. "Mr. Kang, I am calling on behalf of Dr. Shin at Severance Hospital. I'm contacting you because your name was listed as emergency contact for a patient registered under Nyla's name." Ji-won straightened. "She updated her records this morning," the voice continued. "I need to inform you that someone accessed her maternity file approximately 30 minutes ago from an internal hospital terminal." A pause. "We don't know who, but they were looking for her delivery location. They hadn't just separated him from the woman he loved. They had been tracking her. And now, 6 days before everything changed, someone inside the system had just found her." Park Sung-jin had served Kang Ji-won for 11 years. He had taken a bullet meant for him in Busan, had buried secrets that would have destroyed 3 governments, had sat across from men far more dangerous than himself, and never once flinched. He was the person Ji-won trusted above everyone else in his organization, which was exactly why the evidence was so difficult to ignore. It started with a phone record, pulled from the night Nyla disappeared. A call from Sung-jin's private line to a number registered to a relocation firm. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Placed at 2:17 in the morning while Ji-won slept. Then a financial trail. Small, careful, the kind of movement designed to disappear inside legitimate transactions. But Ji-won's forensic accountant had found it buried 3 layers deep. Sung Jin's name attached to a consulting payment from a shell company that traced back, after 6 redirections, to Chairman Woo's personal holdings. Then the photograph, not the one of Nyla at the airport, a different one, Sung Jin, standing outside the building where Nyla had lived, 3 days before she disappeared. Looking up at her window, Ji-won had spread everything across the table in a hotel room 2 floors above the airport and said nothing for a long time. Sung Jin stood across from him, not defending himself, not explaining, just standing, with the expression of a man who had known this moment was coming and had decided, somewhere along the way, to let it arrive without running. That was the detail that didn't fit. Guilty men explained themselves. They constructed timelines. They pointed fingers. 11 years of watching people lie under pressure had taught Ji-won exactly what that looked like. Sung Jin looked like neither. He looked like a man carrying something too heavy to hold much longer. "Say something," Ji-won said. Sung Jin looked at the evidence on the table. "Everything in front of you is real," he said. "The calls, the money, the photograph. Then explain them." "I can't explain them without explaining everything else." He paused. "And everything else involves someone who will move against her tonight if they realize you're no longer distracted." Ji-won crossed the room in 4 steps. He stopped 1 foot from Sung Jin. "You have 30 seconds." Sung Jin didn't move back. "I made the call," he said quietly. "I took the money. I watched her building." His jaw worked once. "But I did not send her away. I was trying to find out who did before they finished the job." Silence. "Someone higher was watching everything you did to find her. Every time you got close, I redirected you, not to protect them." He finally looked up. "To keep her alive, until I had enough to bring you the truth." Ji-won studied him. "Then kneel," he said quietly, "and tell me who gave the order." Sung Jin knelt. "I will. But first you need to know something about the video I recovered." He reached into his jacket. "The face is covered, but the voice." He pressed play, and Ji-won recognized it immediately. For 11 years, he had been the most trusted man in the room. Now he was kneeling, and the voice on that recording was about to destroy everything Ji-won thought he understood about his own life. The voice on the recording was calm. That was the detail that made it worse. Not rushed, not whispered, not the voice of someone doing something they knew was wrong and couldn't look at directly. Calm, deliberate. The voice of someone who had made a decision they believed in completely. "The woman is to be removed before the end of the week. Use the seal, make it look like his decision. She must believe he chose this. If she believes he chose this, she will never come back." A pause on the recording. Then, quieter. "And she must never come back." Ji-won stood completely still. He had heard that voice across dinner tables, had heard it give toasts at celebrations, had heard it speak his name with something that had always felt like pride. The recording ended. Nobody in the room spoke. Sung Jin remained where he was, not kneeling in defeat, kneeling the way soldiers did when delivering news they had carried too long. "How long have you known?" Ji-won asked. 4 months. I found the original order by accident while pulling a separate file. By then she was already gone, and I had no way to reach her without alerting the people still watching." You should have told me. You were being watched too. Sung Jin looked up. Every move you made to find her was being monitored. Twice you came close enough that I had to redirect you myself. Not to protect the people who did this. To stop them from moving against her permanently before you could reach her. The room processed that slowly. She is angry, Sung Jin continued. When I finally made contact 3 months ago, she refused the protection, said it felt like another version of the same control. That landed differently than it should have. Because Nyla was right. Protection from the same world that had destroyed her trust was not protection. It was a longer leash. She came back on her own, Jiwon said. Yes. Why? Sung Jin was quiet for a moment. The child, he said finally. There is a condition. Not dangerous yet, but it requires a specialist available only in Seoul. She didn't come back for you. She came back for the baby. Something passed through Jiwon's chest that had no name in any language he spoke. She had spent 7 months alone, had rebuilt herself around a belief that he had discarded her, had crossed an ocean carrying his child without a single word of explanation owed to anyone. And she had still come back. Not for him, for the child they shared. His phone lit up. A message from a number he didn't recognize. 4 words. She cannot leave Seoul. Then a photograph attached below the message. Nyla, standing outside the hospital. Taken within the last hour. Someone was already watching her. She had come back for the child. Not for him. But someone outside that room had already decided that even that reason was too dangerous to allow. So-yeon had a rule: never confess anything you can still survive denying. She had lived by that rule for 29 years, through a childhood that required it, through a career that demanded it, through 3 years inside Chairman Woo's orbit, where the truth was always the most dangerous thing in any room. But Kang Ji-won was standing in front of her now, and the man who had spent 7 months being managed was entirely gone. She had been brought to a separate room on the same floor, no security outside the door, just Ji-won, standing by the window, looking at her the way she imagined he looked at people, right before he made irreversible decisions about them. She had 3 options. Deny everything. Possible. But Nyla had already exposed the name error at the airport. The thread was loose, and Ji-won had been pulling it for the last 2 hours. Redirect. Offer partial truth. Give him something real enough to satisfy the immediate pressure while protecting the deeper architecture. Or tell him everything. She had practiced the first 2 options extensively. She chose the third. Not because it was safe, because she was tired. Chairman Wu approached me 14 months ago, she said. He told me you were becoming unstable, that a woman had compromised your judgment, that the allied families were concerned. Ji-won said nothing. He asked me to get close to you, hold your attention forward, make sure you were too invested in a future to spend energy excavating the past. She paused. He said it was temporary, that once the inheritance transfer was complete, my role would end and I would be compensated. And you agreed. Not a question. I agreed, she said. I didn't know about the pregnancy. I didn't know what had been done to her. I was told she left willingly, that she had taken money and disappeared because she wanted out of your world. You believed that. I believed what I was given evidence for. Her voice stayed level. The same way she believed what she was given evidence for. That landed. Jiwon turned from the window. The wedding, he said. Tell me what it actually is. Seo-yeon reached into her bag, placed a document on the table between them. It is not a marriage contract, she said. It is a merger agreement disguised as one. The moment you sign, your personal holdings transfer into the Allied Council's trust. Your voting rights dissolve. Your blood heir loses all claim. She watched him read it. I was supposed to get you to sign it voluntarily, she said quietly. Before she arrived, before any of this. She looked at the document. I think someone knew she was coming and moved the timeline up. Jiwon closed the document. Who else knows about the child's condition? Seo-yeon went still. Jiwon, I never told anyone about a condition. She had confessed everything she knew, but the detail she had never been given was already being used, which meant someone inside his circle knew more about Nyla's child than anyone in that room had told them. Nyla had not planned to stay in Seoul longer than 48 hours. Get the consultation, confirm the specialist could handle the delivery, arrange the transfer paperwork, leave before anyone connected enough to cause problems had time to react. She had been in the city for 6 hours. It was already falling apart. She sat in a private room at Severance Hospital with her hands folded over her stomach and her eyes on the door. The consultation had gone well. Dr. Shin was careful and thorough and had asked exactly the right questions. The condition was manageable, treatable with the right team present at delivery. The problem was not medical. The problem was the man standing in the corridor outside her room. Not Jiwon, one of his. She had recognized the posture immediately. The way he stood slightly away from the wall. The way his eyes moved across everyone entering and leaving. The particular stillness of someone trained to wait without appearing to be waiting. Jiwon had sent protection, without asking her, without telling her, without considering for a single moment that she had spent 7 months learning to exist without his decisions being made on her behalf. She was still deciding how angry to be about it when Jiwon himself arrived. He came in without knocking, looked at her once, checked something in his expression, and then closed the door behind him. The specialist confirmed everything, he said. I know. I was there. I want to move you to a secured facility for the remainder of the pregnancy. No. Nyla. No. She held his gaze without difficulty. You don't get to disappear from my life for 7 months and then reappear making decisions about where I sleep. Someone accessed your medical file this morning. I know that too. Then you understand why. I understand that your world created this problem, she said. I am not going to solve it by moving deeper into your world. Jiwon pulled a chair across the room and sat directly in front of her, close enough that she couldn't look past him. 6 days, he said quietly. That is how long before a document gets signed that removes every legal protection this child has before it is even born. I need 6 days to stop it. She studied him. And if I leave Seoul, the people who want that document signed will follow you, because as long as the child exists outside of a protected legal framework, it is easier to make both of you disappear than to fight the claim in court. The room was very quiet. You're telling me I'm trapped, she said. I'm telling you, we have 6 days to make sure you're not. Her phone rang before she could answer. She looked at the screen. An immigration notification. Her passport had just been flagged at every exit point in South Korea. She had come back for 48 hours. Now every door out of the country had just been closed. And the man sitting in front of her was the only person with the power to open them again. Chairman Wu had known Ji-won since he was 19 years old. He had been the one to find him. A young man with dangerous instincts and no direction, moving through the edges of Seoul's underworld like someone who understood the rules but hadn't yet decided whether to follow them. Wu had given him structure, education, access, a name worth carrying. He had called it investment. Ji-won had called it family. For 15 years, that word had meant something. He drove to Wu's residence alone. No security, no Sung-jin, no announcement. The old man was in his study when Ji-won entered, seated behind a desk that had always made him look like someone history had already decided was important. He looked up without surprise, which was itself a confession. "You knew I was coming," Ji-won said. "I knew you would come eventually." Wu set down his pen. "I had hoped it would be after the signing." Ji-won remained standing. "Tell me why." Wu was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of someone constructing a lie. It's the silence of someone deciding how much truth the room could hold. "Your father made that inheritance rule, believing it would protect the bloodline," Wu said finally. "He did not consider what would happen if the bloodline produced an heir outside the approved alliances." "Approved alliances," Ji-won repeated. 12 families. 15 years of architecture. Every alliance calibrated around a specific succession. Wu's voice stayed even. "Then you brought a woman into your life who existed entirely outside that structure. And when she became pregnant, everything your father built was at risk of being redirected toward a child none of those families had agreed to. So you removed her. I protected the structure." The words landed in the room like something irreversible. "She spent 7 months believing I discarded her," Ji-won said. "She raised our child alone. She crossed an ocean alone. She built an entire life on a lie you constructed." "I constructed nothing that wasn't already fragile," Wu said. "I simply accelerated an outcome that was always inevitable. She could have died, but she didn't." Ji-won studied the man across from him. 15 years of trust. 15 years of believing that the closest thing he had to a father was acting in his interest. Every memory now required re-examination. "The child," Wu said quietly. "Even now, Ji-won, think carefully. Everything we built. Everything you built," Ji-won said. Wu leaned forward. "Sign the documents. Let the transfer complete. I will ensure the child is provided for quietly. Nobody moves against her. Nobody follows her. She takes the baby and lives well anywhere in the world she chooses." Silence. "Or," Wu continued, "refuse. And find out how many of those 12 families agree with me." Ji-won's phone lit up. A message from the hospital. "Come now. The baby." For 15 years he had called it family. Now he understood what it had actually been. And the man who had built it was sitting across from him offering a clean exit, while the hospital called with something that couldn't wait. He left Wu sitting in his study. No answer. No threat. No dramatic declaration. Just Ji-won standing up and walking out of a room he had spent 15 years treating as sanctuary. The drive to the hospital took 11 minutes. He spent none of them on the phone. No calls to lawyers, no instructions to Sung Jin. No strategy assembled in the back of a moving car the way he handled every other crisis his life produced. He just drove. Because for the first time in 15 years, Kang Ji-won was not managing a situation. He was making a choice. Nyla was already in the delivery room when he arrived. Not in labor. The baby was not coming yet. But her blood pressure had spiked dangerously, and Dr. Shin had moved her immediately as a precaution. The condition they had discussed that morning had shifted faster than expected. A nurse stopped him at the corridor entrance. Ji-won looked at her once. She stepped aside. He found Dr. Shin outside the room. "She is stable," the doctor said immediately. "The baby is not in distress, but we need to monitor her closely for the next several hours." "What does she need?" "Rest. No stress. No difficult conversations." The doctor held his gaze. "Whatever is happening outside this hospital, Mr. Kang, it cannot come through that door." Ji-won looked at the closed door for a long moment. Then he called Sung Jin. "Pull every document connected to the inheritance transfer," he said. "I want our own lawyers reviewing the voting trust clause before morning. And find me the 2 allied family heads who were closest to my father. Not Wu's people, my father's." "You're going to fight it," Sung Jin said. "I'm going to dismantle it." A pause. "Wu has 11 families behind him. Ji-won, he has 11 families who agreed to a structure that no longer exists." Ji-won turned away from the door. "The moment I acknowledge that child legally, the transfer clause becomes unenforceable. He cannot complete the succession without my signature, and I will never sign. That starts a war." "It was already a war," Ji-won said. "I just wasn't told I was in it." He ended the call. Behind him, the door opened. Seo-yeon stood in the corridor. She had arrived ahead of him somehow. Her eyes were steady. She was holding a document. "The merger contract," she said. "I had my own copy." She held it out. "I think you'll want to see who the secondary signatory is." Ji-won took it. "Read the name on the second line." Everything Wu had told him in that study rearranged itself instantly. The timeline, the urgency, the reason the wedding had been scheduled with such precision. He looked up. "He was never protecting the structure," Ji-won said. "No," Seo-yeon said quietly. "He was stealing it." He had walked out of that study thinking he understood the full picture. The document in his hand just showed him he had only seen the frame. The baby arrived 4 days early. Not in crisis. Not in chaos. Quietly. The way Nyla did everything that mattered. Ji-won was in the corridor when Dr. Shin came out. He had been there for 6 hours. Not pacing, not on his phone, just present in the particular way of someone who has decided that presence itself is the only thing they have left to offer. The doctor said 2 words. "Both well." Something Ji-won had been carrying since the airport that morning, 4 days ago, finally put itself down. He was allowed in after 20 minutes. Nyla was sitting up, not lying defeated against the pillows the way exhaustion usually arranged people. Sitting, with the particular posture of someone who had just done something enormous and was quietly aware of it. The baby was in her arms, small, wrapped in white, eyes closed with the specific certainty of someone who had decided the world could wait. Ji-won stood at the door for a moment, Then he crossed the room and sat beside her. Neither of them spoke immediately. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had said everything that needed saying over the last 4 days. The arguments, the confessions, the careful, painful process of dismantling 7 months of constructed reality and examining what had actually happened underneath it. She had not forgiven him instantly. He had not asked her to. What he had done instead was simpler and more difficult. He had shown her every piece of evidence Sung Jin had recovered. Every document proving the message had never come from him. Every thread leading back to Wu and away from the man she had believed had discarded her. Then he had let her sit with it alone. For as long as she needed. I named her, Nyla said quietly. Ji-won looked at the baby. So-yun, she said. It means a clear and gentle truth. He said nothing for a moment. That's right, he said finally. By sunrise, Chairman Wu's name had been removed from every trust document he had spent 15 years building. By noon, 3 allied families had testified against him. By evening, the man who had tried to steal an empire through an unborn child had lost the empire entirely. Ji-won reached into his jacket. He placed something on the bedside table beside her. A single red rose. Not 40. 1. I had them waiting at the airport, he said quietly. For the wrong reason. The wrong person. He looked at her. I should have been looking for you. Nyla looked at the rose for a long moment. Then at him. You found me, she said simply. The baby shifted in her arms, and for the first time in 7 months, something in the room felt like it was exactly where it was supposed to be. For 7 months, she carried his child in silence. For the rest of his life, he would carry the truth.